9th, 2019 at 10 a.m. At this time, I ask you to please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Determination of voting members. Ms. Anderson is out. Mr. Clay? Here. Mr. Kreisman?
Here.
Mr. Fadley?
Here, but not voting.
Mr. Moldenhauer?
Here.
Mr. Leonard?
Here.
Myself? Alternate vacant county. All right?
Yep.
Yes, sir. There we go. All right. Item number 2, minutes from our last meeting of August 12th, 2019. Do I have a motion to accept the minutes?
So moved.
I have a motion. I have a second. Any further discussions, deletions, corrections? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 3, public hearing, Resolution 19-05, capital connection charge and installation rate reduction.
Make a motion, we open the public hearing.
Second.
I have a motion, I have a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Morning, Board.
Morning.
Morning.
We have in front of you a history of what's happened with capital connection charges over the last almost 4 years. If you go to the attachment after the resolution, you'll see a history of what's happened. In fiscal year 2016, we had 26 new water connections versus a budget of 25. Next year we had, and there was a 75% discount in place for 8 months of that year. The next year, fiscal year 2017, we had a 75% discount in place for the whole year, and we had 49 new connections versus a budget of 25. Fiscal year 18, the discount was in effect for the whole year, and we had 51 new connections versus a budget of 25. And for the first 10 months of this fiscal year, we had a new connection. Again, the 75% discount was in effect, and we had 39 new water connections versus a budget of 25.
So what's that, 189? 190, somewhere in there?
90 and 75, 165 versus 100 in the budget. Okay, for water connections, or wastewater connections, if you take the same scenario and add it all up, we had a budget for 48 new wastewater connections, and we achieved 12, 15, 18, and 14, so that's 30, 45, 59. That sounds like that's too many. 2, 6, 3, 11 over budget. In terms of dollars of capital connection charges, sewer capital connection charges, and installation fees, in fiscal year 16, we basically generated $80,000 of actual revenues versus a budget of 88. In fiscal year 17, we generated $98,000 of new revenues versus a budget of 117. Fiscal year 18, we generated $61,000 of new revenues versus a budget of 107. And in this fiscal year, we've generated $45,000, but the budget was based on a 75% discount, so it was versus $29,000. So all in all, in terms of getting more customers, it's been a successful it's been successful and reasonably close to the budgets.
So you're just looking for us to extend it?
Yes, sir.
Essentially, right now, it has a sunset clause in it.
that as of, if you take no action, September 30th, it will revert back several years to a previous rate schedule. So the question is, if again, we deem that this has been successful, you know, in spurring connections to the system, then we would be asking that it get extended for another year. And I believe for budgetary purposes, we did anticipate that the reductions would stay in effect for the coming year. So it really comes down to an administrative, even though we can show the numbers were slightly higher than what we had projected, we still don't have a direct link that people did come in because it was reduced. It hasn't hurt us significantly financially, so it's really the pleasure of the board. Our staff recommendation would be to extend it, but that's just a recommendation from our position.
It's a little out of kilter because this item is on the agenda for you to consider after this one. I mean, it's already built into the budget. If you approve the budget now, then that automatically means you're going to approve the continuation of the reduced amounts.
Right. Well, because it sunsets after every year, we have to address it.
Correct.
Yes, sir. It was set up that way so that we would know it would be a finite time period, and that's why we set it up for the September 30th deadline. So what are you looking for, Tom?
We got to do all the
Well,
comments
you're in
from
the
the
middle of the public hearing on
Hearing
your
the
budget
whole-
right now, so you need to go forward with.
This would be just discussion period. Once we close it, then we could move
Make a
forward
motion.
with the resolution.
Well, we've got one public here.
Yeah. You're at item
We have two. We have two.
Any comments from the public at this time? Please step up. Okay, any further comments from the board? Do I have a motion to close the public
Motion
hearing?
to close public hearing.
I have a motion, I have a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, motion carries.
I'd like to make a motion to approve Resolution 1905.
I have a motion by Mr. Kreisman. to
Second.
approve, and I have a second by Mr. Clay.
Who's the second?
Mr. Clay, any further discussion?
Point of order. You are including approving of the budget as a part of approving the resolution.
I can. You want to do it now instead of during the budget?
Well, your
Part of it.
public hearing
Okay.
is closed.
I'd like to make a motion to approve Resolution 1905 and reflect it in the annual budget.
Okay.
That the proper way to do it?
You're
I have it.
approving the resolution and the final approval of the budget as presented.
Right.
And we had a second by Mr. Clay. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, motion carries.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't either. You'll have to explain that one to me later.
Actually, we've done both 3 and 4.
Right.
Yeah, you made both public hearings into one, right?
We've done both public hearings in one.
Kind of way I was drawing the line in the sand, but.
So where are we at this point? Are we still
We're
in?
down to
We're-
consent agenda now, aren't
You're
we?
at the
No, we're going to agenda item number 4.
Okay, good. I'd like to hear
You
the
should do
presentation.
item number 4.
Yeah, I
My fault.
don't understand it, but that's okay.
Open public hearing.
Make a motion to open public hearing on agenda item number 4.
Second.
A motion, I have a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, motion carries.
Gentlemen of the board, I'm going to recap what we did at the last August meeting where we approved 4 significant changes to the preliminary budget. Then I'll give you a summary of the budget afterwards. But at the last meeting, we added to the budget the FDOT roundabout traffic circle. It's cost of $391,000, and that's assuming all the work's done by consultants and contractors, not OUA personnel. But it is anticipated that some of the labor will be done by OUA personnel. The second item we approved at the last board meeting, or discussed at the last board meeting, was a wastewater treatment facility demonstration project in Lakeview Estates. That was for $1 million, but it was to be funded by a state appropriation. Third item we discussed at the last meeting was a meter installation project in Buckhead Ridge in the southern service area for 3,800 residential customers. Cost of approximately $720,000, and 50% of that cost is to be funded by a water conservation project grant. And these items will be coming back to the board at the future date when appropriate. They're just in the budget at this point. Then the last thing we approved at the last board meeting was a reduction in the OEA healthcare benefit for employees from $775 per month to $700 per month for employees. And that resulted in a $43,000 savings in annual healthcare costs for OUA into next year, into 2020 budget. Okay, a summary of the final budget for fiscal year 20 is as follows. We don't have a rate increase in there for base or volumetric charges. The last time we had a rate increase, though, was effective October 1st, 2018. As we just approved, we're continuing the 75% discount on the capital connection charges for water and sewer and the associated installation fees. The budget does not include a grant from FEMA for hurricane damage, which is anticipated to be received in fiscal year 20. In the budget, there's a $57,000, approximately 6% increase in total operating revenues to $10.4 million. There's a nominal increase in total operating expenses. However, the fiscal year 19 budget had a non-recurring cost of $394,000 to repair the residual drying facility at the wastewater treatment plant. Labor in the budget is anticipated to increase 3.4%. Operation and maintenance expenses is budgeted to decrease 3.3%. Debt service for fiscal year 20 is $2.4 million. There's $75,000 needed from the rate stabilization fund to satisfy the debt service coverage requirements. Internal funding for capital improvement projects and departmental capital expenditures is $3.6 million. And if you go to pages 3 and 4, you see if you go to, excuse me here for a second, tab B, pages 3 and 4, there's a comparative presentation of fiscal year 19 versus fiscal year 20 budgeted revenues. So if you go to that page on line 18, you'll see that water utility revenues are projected to go up from $6,200,000 to $6,289,000. And you'll see that wastewater utility revenues is projected to decrease from $3.9 million to $3,853,000. And the rest of the items are pretty much not much different than they were the previous year. So you'll see the bottom line is we're $57,000 projected increase in revenues.
Why is wastewater going down?
Well, based on reviewing actual usage, we've had less volumetric usage of wastewater for the 10-month period June 2019 versus 2018.
But also equal to that, we have about 9,500 water metered connections and about 4,400 wastewater. And the number of wastewater accounts is growing. If you remember Whispering Pines, we added like 150 accounts. It's growing faster. So the general revenue for water accounts only is going to trend a little higher than the wastewater. And the only reason why the wastewater that we could surmise is either A, usage went down, or B, we've had a few terminations, like foreclosures, whatever, that had wastewater accounts, helping to drive it down a little bit. But primarily, the number of water connections are going up, and that's why that revenue stream is showing a slight increase.
All right. Then the next tab in the budget to look at for comparison is page C2, and you'll see a comparison of the budgeted operating and non-operating expenses on page C2. And if you look at line 26, you'll see that total operating expenses is only $5,000 more than fiscal year 19. And then if you go to line 32, you'll see that due to the fact that we paid off SRF2, our non-operating expenses are down $109,000 approximately. And then the bottom section shows you about transfers, and the transfers are significantly different, but again, the budget's in balance. All right, then if you go to tab D, first page, you'll see what's budgeted for departmental capital expenditures, and that total is $839,000. Administration is $350,000 for a water and wastewater master plan. Maintenance has quite a few items, the largest being a bypass pump at Northwest 15 for $147,000, and the largest for wastewater is an entrance road paving work of $105,000. So that all totals $838,000. And the last page I'd like to refer you to is Schedule O, and it's line 61. It's at the bottom of the page, and you will see how all the fund accounts end up after everything's appropriated, but that doesn't mean everything will be spent. So this is like a worst-case scenario in terms of cash, but based on our history since I've been here, that won't happen. And that's all I have to say about the budget.
Mr. Chair, I have two items, if I may. Yes, sir. I have two items.
This is the public hearing part.
Oh, okay.
Not public.
Comments from the public? Any further comments from the board? Do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
I have two items I'd like to discuss, please, George. First off, being the rate increase. I thought this board acted on Murray's recommendation last year that we were going to, over the next 4 or 5 years, make small increment increases, like one, I don't remember the exact, but it was 1.5% last year, and then 0.5% for the next till we got up to where we needed to be, like 5%. So I thought that was in place, that we had another rate increase this year. You just alluded that we don't.
I think I remember that it was supposed to go up 1% or something a year on a gradual
Little small bites.
bites.
That's the way we discussed that.
Yeah.
I don't know if any motions were ever made, but
And that very well can happen. It was based upon this budget. What we're presenting is that under our existing projects, that we were able to pull money out of different reserve accounts to balance it. If there is going to be a rate increase, which we could certainly do, then I think what we were projecting on is once we got closer to where we were going to be with the Southwest Wastewater Service Area, when they finished up that work in November or December, the facilities plan, we have a better look at what that cost is going to be. That is going to be a driving factor in where we need to be with our rates. We clearly, when you look at the last line item that George presented there, in our operating funds, we are down near the bottom of those funds. So a rate increase for nothing else to replenish some of those funds as a buffer, if you will, towards projects certainly could be beneficial.
I just thought it was already decided that that's what we were doing for the next few years, and it did not show up on the budget as a resource, income resource.
And we would certainly work at the direction of the board, that if they wanted to increase that, we could certainly bring that back at a later date to show the benefits of that rate increase.
John, can I ask that you do that, knock the dust off of that report from Murray, and I thought we had acted on, and we discuss it at next meeting?
We certainly can, sir.
Thank you. And the second item I have, if I understood you correctly, Mr. Gall, you said that we had decided to use a contractor for the roundabout. I think at the last meeting, we decided we were going to do that in.
No, sir, you misunderstood me.
Okay.
The budget's built on the fact if we did not do any of the work in-house, that's would be $391,000. But
Okay.
we don't know how much of the work we can do in-house, so we budgeted the worst, knowing that wouldn't happen.
Okay, thank you.
To John's point, I'm pretty sure that we decided to do like I want to say it was over a 4-year period, we were going to try to get to 5%.
That's what I recall.
I think that's what we decided last year, that it was going to be automatic go up. Yeah, so can you look at that, for sure?
We'll look at it, that's
Yeah.
what I thought. 'Cause we all hate that ugly word of rate
but we
increase,
don't-
but we're where we are.
It's easier to do it in little
Small
bits and pieces than it
Yeah.
is to take big bites.
Sure is.
That's the only way they got us to get our fingers out of it and let it expand a little bit, was little increments. Yeah.
Nothing stops you from adopting the budget. This would require another public hearing if you do the rate increase.
Yes, sir. It would just be, just like the,
Which could come.
Amend it, yeah.
yeah, just like the resolution we had before this. It would just be another open public hearing and adjust the rate schedule accordingly.
Perfect.
Motion to approve Resolution 19-06.
Yes, sir. We'd close and then,
Motion that public hearing be closed.
Second.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
We've already approved this, haven't we, Counselor?
I told you wrong a minute ago. We were talking about capital.
we now have resolution
Afraid to say
19,
anything else.
we have to approve resolution 1906 now to adopt the budget, correct?
We can
Yes.
approve the budget as presented and resolution 1906.
So said.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Yay.
Moving down to our consent agenda.
Now, have we done everything right so far, Tom?
I think
Before we go any further.
you're fine. We'll clean up the resolution in 1905.
I make a motion that we accept the consent agenda as written. Consent agenda as written.
Second.
I have a motion. I have a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
What was this handout on item number 11?
If you'll look at the presentation in your board package, the July 19th amount requested, $1,770.33, belonged under the amount paid column.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
So that the amount requested, $14,787.50, is the only amount being requested.
Very good.
So this is just an addition to the consent agenda. You're not going to talk about this later?
We can certainly talk about it under either items from the attorney or board or the executive
I
director.
just assume we do it right now, under the consent agenda, included in there as a correction.
We can do it, then the request would probably be to pull this agenda item so that we can't really have discussions about the consent agenda, if I understand
You're
correctly.
not following me, John. You've corrected item 11 in the consent agenda.
Yes, sir.
We're not going to bring that up later and talk about it, are we? This is.
No, we'll just bring about Vosel-Berg if you want to.
You're shaking your head. I like that. Yes. Okay. So we're going to, with the consent agenda, we're going to accept this new document.
This document with it.
It's number 11 is a part of the consent agenda.
Right.
So said.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Invoice from Thorn Run Partners. Hold on, excuse me, wait a second.
12.
Hurricane Dorian, the storm that would never leave.
Well, luckily, as the note implied, it did turn. It saw the OUA in its crosshairs and didn't like that, so it turned and went north, or something to that effect, high pressure zones. But in all seriousness, it was a dangerous storm. As a utility, we did some preparations, last minute preparations that we typically would do before a storm arrives. That being that getting our treatment plants off of FP&L power and on generators, and some of our stationary generators at lift stations likewise were taken off of FP&L and put on generator power. And then as luck would have it, or skill or whatever, Dorian turned and we dodged it. So other than the generator cost and a little bit of labor for staffing overnight 24-hour operations, that was the extent. We did not have any reported damage at this time to any of our facilities.
All the generators work okay?
Yes, sir.
How much fuel do we have on hand?
Sir?
How much diesel fuel do we have on hand
You're talking about the generators?
for generators?
It depends upon the size. Many of our smaller generators are less than the 550 gallons that require DEP permitting. The generators at the treatment plants range anywhere from 4,000 to 7,000 gallons.
Do we have any way of filling them on our own?
No, sir.
So we have to rely on a local vendor?
A local vendor with their fuel truck comes by and fill the bigger ones. Now, the smaller ones, we do have some day tanks that we can haul around and put a little bit of fuel in, but for the most part, if we run those for 2 or 3 days, it's a fuel delivery from a local source.
How long will the big ones run on the 4,000 gallons we have?
You know, I don't know that for sure because it's all based upon the load put on the generator, but typically they're at least 3 or 4 days. So it's not a significant amount of time, but it would give us enough time to where the storm passes, we could get a fuel delivery in there.
Cat 5, you're not going to need a fuel delivery.
I'm an eternal optimist, and if we had a significant storm hit, there would be a lot of things that we'd be worried about.
Yep.
And fuel would just be one
One
of
of
many.
them. Yeah.
If you remember, in the 04 storm season, it was trees going down that broke water mains and a stirred up lake that was nothing more than a mud bowl. Well, the OUA board and OUA took matters into fixing the lake problem in that we would now have a pump station off of the Rim Canal to give us an alternative water source, but we will always have that issue of broken water mains during the storm from trees going down or other such damage. Treatment plants, we've had minor damage at some of those, screened enclosures, things like that. But our biggest fear there is electrical damage due to surge. And that's why we get off of the FP&L grid, that should it get hit with lightning a mile away or half mile away, we shouldn't see those transient voltages at our treatment plant. It will not stop a lightning hit at our treatment plant, of course, but that's why we move off of the FP&L grid where we can. It's nothing against the grid, it's just they get lightning strikes and some of our equipment just can't handle that.
It's just preparedness.
So,
John, just a thought, and I'm just talking out loud now. You probably might have looked into this before. Have we ever thought of buying a tanker truck where we could, under situations like this, like a Class B or something, that we could run over to Port Consolidated on the coast or whatever? If we're waiting on deliveries, we could bypass that vendor and do
You gotta
something
have-
of that nature?
we probably could, but I don't think we,
A driver with a hazmat, you gotta be hazmat insured, and you've
I've
gotta
got all
have,
that, and I'm available.
and then you've gotta have someone in this office that can
Current
dispatch
salary?
hazmat.
My current salary, I'm available. Now, I was just wondering if you'd ever looked at options like that, if,
no, sir, we really haven't.
never needed to?
Well, it's something that we'd have to keep up with, a tanker truck sitting there, that's not in use, making sure, I'm not in that business, but I would think there'd be some maintenance issues with that tanker truck sitting there, the tanker itself, the trailer.
They're very expensive going in. It's just all the steps and procedures you have to do to be, again, you got to send somebody to school in your office so that you have someone in your office, hazmat trained, regardless that you've only got one person in one truck, and then, you got the extra insurance,
Well, I would imagine we'd even have to have a contract with a terminal somewhere where we could pull in and buy fuel. And
well, you can do that through the two vendors you have here. You can buy
Negotiate a contract whereby if there's a named storm at a particular category, that the OUA could have preference and the ability to purchase or rent a truck for standby use.
Well, and I can only say from our past experience, the local vendors have been very knowledgeable and gracious that when we needed fuel, we got fuel.
But I don't know if a lot of people know that when these trucks travel, just like last week, I come home Wednesday from Virginia, and we had to run north from Virginia to hit 95 to come south because they had one way coming in, and every one of those groups of trucks you see going, and we seen hundreds, and they all had fuel trucks running with them, not from their company, but like Palmdale Oil, everybody sends their fuel trucks on these
Caravans with like,
caravans, because all these trucks are fueled on the side of the roads, they're not taken into stations, they'll pull into the scales, fuel truck pulls in, fuels them all up, he gets another load of fuel and takes off behind them. But that's the only way that let's say Wilmington got hit. Well, all those trucks converge in there and all the surrounding areas, they've got fuel to work for a few days because they brought all these trucks with them. Even though they don't own a fuel truck, but all these companies send them with them.
So just thinking out loud.
okay, yes, sir.
We would get preferential treatment probably behind the hospital and the
In the jail.
jail. And of course, having, the Gilbert Oil Company here and the Palmdale Oil Company here and so many of their people living here, I would think we would,
It's been very, very good in
Yeah.
the past.
yeah.
It might be more feasible if we wanted to store fuel to put it in a stationary tank, that we could fill day tanks and, transfer it ourselves in emergencies.
Yeah, it's cheaper to have an on-site tank if that's what you wanted to do.
Yeah, if you wanted to store fuel.
I'm not I've been in the fuel hauling business, and if you've noticed those, I don't work with Walpole anymore, but if you notice those green trucks of Walpole that used to say fuel on them are now white and say Gilbert on them.
For a reason.
For a reason.
And let me jump in while you're talking about the hurricane. John, I don't see that approval of that joint agreement on participation.
Yes, sir, I forgot. The mutual aid agreement.
You're gonna bring that one up?
I didn't bring it with me, so I can bring it up next month, unless everybody is familiar with what was emailed to them.
I didn't see it on the agenda, and I know that that was something that really should be done, but if you want to wait on the next meeting, that's fine.
We
Is
could
that the
probably
one I
pull it
said,
up
do
from
what you
email,
want, I'm in
couldn't we?
Virginia?
Well, it was emailed to every board member, and basically everybody came back saying, the few that did came back saying there was positive in it, so it was signed and sent out.
Okay.
Do you want me to bring it back
We-
next
we'll-
month, or do you want to
we'll
vote on it?
need- There still needs to be a formal action ratifying the.
Can we do that now without having it present, or should I bring it back next month?
We could probably pull it up on our email.
Whatever you want to do, I can bring it back next month. if you want.
I just hope we don't need it in the meantime between now and the next meeting. I think it's a very important agreement. I'm surprised we don't already have that joint participation with other utilities on an emergency situation.
Would it be proper, Tom Perrin, to bring it up under items from the director?
Why don't you bring it up under items from the director?
We can act on it, right?
Everybody's seen that. I mean, you all seen that agreement? Okay,
Do it that way?
we can do it then. We can do it then.
Agenda item number 13, Taylor Creek water quality sampling.
Mr. Chairman and board members, this was a project that was ongoing for quite a while, and then it took some time to generate a final report, of which you had one submitted to you for your review. Just as a backup or as a recap of what we did, the OUA had a project looking at Taylor Creek Isles, Taylor Creek, and Treasure Island, knowing that Taylor Creek Isles was sewered in around 2005, with many of the houses, not all of them, many of the houses connecting into a central sewer. Treasure Island is still on septic tanks and packaged treatment plants. The intent of the project was to be able to do some water quality sampling both in Taylor Creek Isles and Treasure Island, as well as several points within Taylor Creek as a background, and to compare nutrients, be it nitrogen or phosphorus, or water quality parameters like conductivity, but also using an indicator parameter, sucralose, which is an artificial sweetener. In this sampling program, you can see that there were a number of sample sites, 13, 5 on Taylor Creek Isles, 5 in Treasure Island, 3 in Taylor Creek, that were sampled multiple times during the time period that there were our winter visitors. And then during the non-peak months, it may have dropped to 1 sampling event. You can look at the data, and while sucralose was found in all of the sample sites, you can see back in the back of the report that if you look at just the mean, the weighted mean for all of the samples, they were higher on the Treasure Island side than in the background area of Taylor Creek, or certainly within the Taylor Creek Isles. It's labeled Treasure Creek Isles, but it's Taylor Creek Isles on this report. So this is just the first report or the first sampling. I would certainly think that a follow-up sampling procedure could be done, and I would certainly suggest that we utilize another agency from the standpoint that it would offer some validity to the first project of sampling if the board was so inclined. But I'll be happy to answer any questions you might
Didn't you
have.
already do this?
This
Didn't we have one before telling us that the sugar additive was already in the water? I thought I'd heard this before.
I think it was just explaining what was going to happen.
Yes, that's what.
Yeah.
Is that what it was?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the sucralose, it's an indicator that's used for human consumption or human use. When you measure something like nitrogen or phosphorus, there's always a discussion as to what was the origin of the nitrogen and phosphorus, whether it was legacy or fertilizer or agricultural or wherever it may have originated from. As I always said with the sucralose, it's clearly a human use. It's not a additive and a fertilizer, and certainly there's not too many otter and fish that use artificial sweetener on their food before they eat. So if it shows up, it's going to be a direct link to human use.
So we can't blame this on nobody is what you're telling us.
I don't know that there's anything to blame. It is just a little more proof positive that there is a difference in the collection system versus septic tank and,
Right.
and package treatment plant.
And if you read it, now I'm not going to say I read it all, but if you read the highlights of it, that's basically what it's telling you. Septic tank side was high, and the other side on sewage.
The central, it's lower. Now, there are some in Taylor Creek Isles that have chosen not to get on our system, so they're still on septic tanks.
And there's going to be some residual sucralose in the ground that's going to leach in for a few years too.
Well, and it could be even issues of wind driven. You know, if there's a strong easterly breeze, water will be driven up on the western canals, Taylor Creek. So there's a little bit of everything there, and that's one of the reasons why we tried to grab some samples upstream of our study area just to establish where that background is.
So what staff is wanting is approval for RFPs.
Well, if yes, I mean, that would be certainly, I would go out to a couple different agencies and try to see if they could come up with, if you will, a second phase of this project to sample for a time period and entertain thoughts from them if the board was so inclined.
We couldn't get another college to do it.
The two I'm thinking about, one would be Harbor Branch, and
That would be my first bet.
and the other one is
And University
through,
of Florida's not coming down here, so.
the other one is, I think it's either through FIU or FAU.
Harbor Branch does a good job. I mean, their stuff's easy to read. And
But it would be one of those two. And there's nothing against Florida Gulf Coast, but it's just the idea that if we get another agency and they come up with a similar results, it would add some validation.
Right. It's like getting a second opinion from a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And I like the fact that the Harbor Branch guy doesn't care whose toes he steps on. Facts are facts.
Well, the other person I was talking to is on this, he's real informative on blue-green algae, and he's already sampling in Taylor Creek for that. And he's looked at this process, and he understands where we want to go. So either one of them would be a fine choice, I think.
So you need a motion?
Well, at least certainly direction if they were so inclined.
It doesn't cost you anything to get RFPs on that. So, yes, it would require a motion for staff to proceed to obtain RFPs.
For a second round of water quality testing in Treasure Island and Taylor Creek Isles and the Taylor Creek Basin.
Yes, sir.
Second.
Was that a motion?
Yeah, that's
Okay, motion by
about
Mr.
as good as it's going to
A
get.
second by Mr. Kreisman. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to agenda item number 14, OUA contract with Cass Government Services, LLC.
This is brought back to the board as informational, at least purposes of discussion. At the last board meeting, there was a request to see the current contract that we're operating under with CAS Governmental Services, and I've attached it accordingly for your review and any discussions. I would certainly point out that in looking through this one, it would appear that we are under the last one-year extension, so we may be needing to go out for an extension. However, I would certainly point out that this year, because of the election cycle, The state legislative group has moved forward to January or February, and I would certainly caution the board to consider not changing midstream in the middle of a legislative session, that we continue on with what we're going, whether that means we go for a full year or 6 months. Clearly, under this process, there is a cancellation period of 30 days in there, but I would just bring that to you, your attention for discussion this morning.
So what's your recommendation?
My feel right now is that we should stay with who we have for certainly the legislative, but maybe next June or July we could revisit this and then decide what the board's pleasure is.
Dale and Connie do us a good job. They open a lot of doors for us, and they help us a lot more than our federal people did. I think we took care of that problem last month. So, yeah, you guys are right in the middle of making your visits and all this stuff, and you were at a place last week. You know, I don't think it would have been doable without Dale and Connie's help.
I can tell you in those meetings, they all were very positive about Jim Spratt and Connie's work effort. We have another meeting this afternoon with another Florida senator, and I would expect the same thing from that person.
I'm of the opinion if it's not broke, don't fix it, and if we need to get some RFPs to keep people honest, that's different. But this seems to have been working okay for us.
Either way, I would still suggest we need RFPs because this one was written with only 2 one-year extensions. So,
Well, not only that, but they're representing all of us too. And I think we need to at least take a look outside the box. Not trying to go against them, just saying I think we need to look outside the box and see what else is available out there so that we're not represented by the same group that's representing the city, the county, and every other city and county around the lake. That's just my opinion, but I think we need to look and see what else is available. Might not be anything out there that's even close, but I would definitely like to look.
okay.
But we need a 6-month extension.
Right now.
Right now, we need a 6-month
There's
extension.
no action taken on this right now.
Do you want to get an extension because this thing is set to expire January 2020?
January. Well, here we are in September.
We look at it in January. We'll look at it in December.
Like November, December timeframe? Okay.
Moving on to agenda item number 15. Any comments from the public? Items from our attorney.
You're going to see some more costs on our 46th Avenue villas because of the deposition process. We're still going to have some interesting ones to take. This is where it gets expensive in the discovery process.
So we just got to continue down this road until we,
At this point, we're committed, and they're committed. So I'm hoping it's costing our plaintiff some money on this. Our first depositions were taken, they were interesting.
It's important.
But we still stop at the master meter, right? We don't have anything on the property. Are we still doing the lift station or what? We
No, sir,
stop at
nothing.
the master meter.
At the master meter.
Okay. So yeah, it might start costing him a whole lot.
yeah, when they start having failures on that other side, it's not up to us.
Oh,
So they got to call in some other.
exactly. That would be my position.
Yes. Do we need to make sure that happens? Do we need to? No. Do we need to make sure that we have a?
You want a motion on that?
Yeah, I mean, do we need a motion that we're not going in there?
At this point, no.
Y'all thinking too far back in the
I don't
past.
recommend any action. I recommend you take no action on that right now.
No action motion by Mr. Clay.
But back in the day,
Oh, I'm sorry, I do have one more thing too. we're overdue for our evaluations on John. I'm going to be emailing you the forms. I meant to do, last,
It's an annual deal.
this is your roasting process. I get to I will follow this up after this meeting and send you out the evaluation forms. So please get them back. I know we're in September.
At least by next September?
Be any help, just send them to me, I'll fill them out for you.
I need to tell you that publicly. They will be coming to you.
Any chance we can get that form in a form that we can fill out on the computer?
The
Yes.
computer expert is over there.
Why not? She
That would
said-
be a no then.
It would be nice if,
On your personal computer, that's writable, like if you have Adobe where you
Well, we'll check.
Okay.
that's,
That it? John Stern?
Items from the director.
Well, yeah, I can go down the line here of any of these
got quite a list.
deals, but it's all pretty self-explanatory. We've, through Connie and Jim's help, we've been able to already have one meeting with Senator Simpson. We have another one with Senator Mayfield today. There is hope that we could get one meeting with Representative Rothschein. And these folks are all in a position of where our appropriations go to their committees. So it's kind of important that we meet with them, talk about the Southwest area program and the other three, and explain to them where we're at, where we're coming forward, and that they will see these in the coming weeks as they wind their way through either the Senate or the House. There's talk about the $40 million that were set aside for water quality programs. I can tell you I haven't heard anything more other than we were shortlisted. But what I cannot tell you is how short is the short list and how much money was involved in that short list. So when they say we're shortlisted, that sounds good, but if the short list included 200 projects for $550 million vying for $40 million, it doesn't really mean much.
No.
I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm saying the good thing is that we were at least shortlisted and we got a second round of questions about the projects to further explain them. And I have still high hopes that something will come from that. The water conservation application, same thing, that was submitted on time. They couldn't tell me anything about that as to where that process is, how many projects, how much money. So we'll just wait and see on the water conservation. The State Road 710, yes, there's a meeting set up with someone at the district level who's gotten in with met with the county and the city and arranged a meeting with the OUA to try to resolve this issue of the well field and the location of the State Road 710. I can tell you from our position, both the DEP statute dealing with wellhead protection that says there should be a 500-foot setback, to the county LDRs, which apply to the north side of our property and the south side, is the city comp plan. Both of those have requirements of, I think, either 200 to 300 feet. So I don't know where the DOT is coming from. We'll have to wait and see. Our opinion is still that while the DOT could have captured some of the water on the road with their stormwater conveyance system, we know that that only handles wrecks that occur on the highway or spillage that occurs on the highway. There are a number of accidents that happen on the shoulder of roads, of which the stormwater conveyance system wouldn't capture. So it's still an issue. We have shallow well fields. I still have that, maintain that position that they should have moved the road further north a couple hundred feet to give us that separation that we need between the state highway and our well field.
It's not like we're telling them to move it a quarter mile. It needs to move a couple hundred feet.
Well, they've moved it once, if you remember, because they were taking our backwash pond, which would have put us out of business. So they heard that issue, and that they moved by choice. We have made comments to them since the start of time 3-4 years ago that they needed to move the road north a couple hundred feet. They could have moved it at that same time. Why didn't they move it? And they won't, and I'm not sure why that is. But I've heard that there is some pressure on us, that they want this road built, local folks. And so I don't know where that meeting's going to happen, but it's on the 23rd here at the county offices at 10 a.m. is where we're supposed to meet. So I'll keep you posted. But if it's the board's pleasure that we still need to push for a separation, I'll certainly push it hard as I can.
Well, I mean, it's their rules.
The LDRs are the LDRs.
Yours, I mean,
I'm with you.
Just gotta hold the.
I mean, it was all this stuff was put in there to protect the well fields, not just ours, but any of them.
Right.
So why all of a sudden is it convenient not to go by your own LDRs?
Well, or abide by the state wellhead setback 500 feet.
Yeah.
I mean, they were all, like you said, put in there for a reason, and I don't understand why a highway system where there is very little regulation of what goes down that highway, there is very little protection if there should be, an off-road type incident, how we have protection for our ratepayers.
Just imagine a load of leachate getting turned over in the well field.
Well, or a couple hundred gallons of diesel fuel from a saddle
I'd
tank.
rather drink diesel fuel than I had leachate water.
So
Point being, I mean, we could be, and this is just being sarcastic, but I don't want to be Flint, Michigan, and 20 years down the road that we find out we've got a problem in our well fields because some kind of contamination got in because of a highway went by. You've got everything running up and down that road. You're going to have, your trucks are going to be diverting through there, and there's stuff going to this landfill and landfills above us that, with auto fluffs and everything else are high in metals, and then the leachates that go around here. So, we got to do the minimum, which is their minimum, my opinion.
If we looked at what the cost would potentially be, John, excuse me, if they do put the corridor in where they're saying, for us to move our wells to be compliant, the 500 feet, what it would be a cost to our ratepayers to comply if they're not willing to move, just spin in a different angle that this is what we're going to have to do if you continue with what you're doing to be.
No, we have not. I mean, it would have to be significant. The well field would have to move significantly north.
Right.
Because there is, where they're at now, there is no room to get 500 foot of separation.
That was going to be my next question. Do we have the
There, if you're going to do this, we have to do this at this cost. It'd be cheaper for you. I'm just thinking
and that we're going to come back on somebody for that cost?
well, our ratepayers will have to pay that. That's how I'm.
Turn around and sue the Department of Transportation. It's so simple. And they're
Well,
making it so
it-
difficult.
It would, I thought it was pretty easy just to move the road north a couple hundred feet and we'll be fine. But
All still in the planning stages. They've got property bought. All they have to do is trade or move. Anyway. I don't get it, but I'm not the smartest guy in the world either, so.
I will bring it back next meeting and let you know what they say.
Is this
Well, it's
20?
not over yet. It's not over yet. I mean, we're still, at least we're up higher elevations than where we've been in the hierarchy of DOT at this next meeting. We're no longer down here at the,
Yeah, this is,
Right, but now our politicians are getting involved.
it may be.
Yeah.
Because I've got a little sketch I'll show you in a minute when we
Okay.
adjourn to show you another part of the problem.
Okay.
John, this meeting on the 23rd at 10 a.m. in Robbie's office, is that open to anybody or is that by invite only? Could any
I,
of us come to that?
I don't know that answer. If, I would think that if a board member wanted to attend that meeting, that would be fine. But if there were several board members, we'd have to publicly advertise it.
I didn't know how they formatted this as a public hearing or it's a private meeting between.
They did not tell me that it was a public meeting per se, like a hearing.
So basically, they can only have one commissioner there, one city councilman there.
I don't
Unless
know.
they
I don't know
advertise it.
what they advertise, so I'd have to find that out. I'm just saying from our perspective, if more than one board member was there, we would need to publicly advertise the meeting.
You're not doing anything that morning, are you?
Well, I'm going to be there for sure.
Okay.
They want to designate a
Shouldn't you be
rep.
there?
Yeah, I'll be there.
We got another board member over here that's attorney too.
I second the motion.
Enough notice, I'll go.
I mean, if the board wants to officially designate
I
a
think that-
representative,
I think that's wonderful.
I think it's a great idea to get Jeff's
Clay made the
opinion on it.
motion, I'll
Okay.
second the motion.
I make a motion that we have Jeff Fadley attend with John Hayford, the meeting between the county and the city and the Department of Transportation concerning the bypass road and our well field.
Second.
I have a second. Mr. Moldenhauer, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Southeast 8th Avenue, the project is out for bid right now. Bids are due September 30th. The engineer would review the bids, check references, and we would be bringing that back at the October meeting for the board's consideration of the bids and/or recommendation of award. To that end, I'll point out that Holtz Consultant got us a invoice very late after board packages went out in the amount of $4,318. As always, you have the option of not paying it, and we can put it in the consent agenda next month because it got here late. Knowing that it's going to be back in the October meeting, you also have the election if you want to pay it, authorize us to pay this at this time.
Make a motion, we pay the bill.
I have a
Second.
motion, I have a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Other than that, Southeast 8th Avenue is progressing. Like I said, we have the plans. They've been reviewed by the city, DEP permits. September 30th, we get our bids back for that project.
That main is going to go down to the county line, John,
Sir?
on Southeast 8th Avenue.
This water main will replace what is there now. Primarily, it will be an upgrade in size in some areas because there's 4-inch pipe in that area. Because we would be adding fire hydrants, we would increase the diameter to provide fire protection in those areas.
And those pipes are going to go,
Leaving them in the ground or?
well, that was,
What's the question?
The other pipes that are being replaced, are they just staying in the ground?
That's a good question. We have bid it two different ways. The primary amount of pipe is asbestos cement pipe, AC pipe. My recommendation would be we would dig it up and remove it and dispose of it properly at the landfill because it's gone. The other option that we have is to grout fill the pipe and leave it in place, but we will always be responsible for that hazardous material in the ground.
Yeah, you own it.
We're going to disturb
Forever.
it to move it. where it is right now, it's not disturbed, but I guess if somebody did dig in there, it would be.
Yeah.
The problem with if somebody hit it, they would break it, it now becomes friable, ACM. If the intent of what we want to do and what we have done in the past, we basically unscrew it, pull it apart, it stays encapsulated and it's not friable. What we would then do is wrap it in plastic, put it in a dumpster, and then haul it to the landfill.
Yeah, they bag it and bury it.
And certainly that would be my recommendation until we get the price tag on September 30th. But the recommendation is that we strongly consider using that alternate method to remove it from the area.
And we're going to put the pipe next to, yeah, what I'm trying to get at, in other words, we're going to be going through every homeowner's driveway then?
We designed it to minimize impacts to both roadway and driveways. It's inevitable that there will be some asphalt cuts. There will inevitable that some driveways, front, the drainage swales, the lawns are going to be disturbed, but they will be restored. So if it's somebody's driveway that gets dug up from where we cut it all the way out to the edge of pavement is slated to be repaired in kind. So if it's gravel, if it's asphalt, if it's concrete, it would be replaced in kind. Other than that, the 3 million gallon ground storage tank, if you've driven by the treatment plant, you can clearly see the inner wall is up. They will start wrapping it in steel and then encapsulating that in shotcrete to complete the wall. It's still progressing. Again, I didn't hear any damage from the winds of Tropical Storm Dorian. So that project is moving right along.
I've been having a ball with the plastic wrapping. Everybody keeps asking me why it's wrapped in plastic, and I said, keep it from leaking.
There is some truth to that. There actually is going to be a membrane
Right.
in the wall, but it won't be the Visqueen.
Yeah, I bet you I've been asked that 30 times.
That's a good Visqueen, hold 3 million gallons back away.
It's just in place to hold the Visqueen there. Cemetery Road drying facility, that's moving along. Hopefully that will be complete by the next time we have our meeting. Luckily, we dodged a bullet with the storm, and so the new panels are going on as we speak. We probably at this time have 2 of the 3 buildings completed, moving forward with the 3rd and final building, and then they'll get into the electronics and electrical replacement after that. Last, I guess we added the mutual aid agreement. I'm sorry I forgot to include that. You got an email from the Florida Warren community. The mutual aid agreement is a 2-way agreement. If we were to provide aid and assistance to an impacted utility, it helps to protect our investment of materials and getting reimbursement. Likewise, if we were damaged and needed assistance from outside utilities, it provides that guarantee to them also that that they will be reimbursed. The mutual aid agreement, as presented to each of you by email, which you reviewed, was a document that we signed and sent in shortly thereafter, in advance of the storm.
I'm going to make a motion that we execute that document and send it back.
It's already been executed, so you're approving a document and ratifying its execution.
Make a motion that we ratify the executed document.
I have a motion. I have a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
John, when you presented that to us last storm, I think we've seen this before. Wasn't most of the state party to this agreement?
Oh, there's a significant number of utilities that have signed on. This document's been around for a number of years. The last time it was presented, it wasn't approved, but I can't recall why it wasn't. but it is just a standard document that a significant number of utilities, cities, counties have signed. I believe that's all I have this morning.
Any items from any board member at this time? If not, meeting adjourned.
Get all our housekeeping done? We're all done.